Hi guys, today in the workshop we have another Fiat 500 that's in for an issue with its starter motor. So when you start the car, the starter motor is making a horrible noise, but it's intermittent at the minute. But it's a high-pitched squealing sound that can be heard when the starter is trying to engage. And normally that's because the starter is staying on for too long. So instead of winding it back into the unit, it's staying out, and it's the rotation of the engine going so fast which causes that noise. So let's get it replaced. But first, because we don't want to work on a live system, we want to disconnect the negative terminal on the battery just to make sure everything's nice and safe to work on. So it's a 10mm on the negative terminal. And this can just be tucked out of the way. So with the car up in the air, there's a few 10mm that go around to hold up the under tray. There would normally be some screws on the side as well, but they are missing from this one. So with that cover off, we can see around the back of the engine, just above the drive shaft. See if we can get the camera up there. There's our starter motor. That's one bolt holding it on. There's another one, and there should be another one possibly on the other side going this way. So the other one probably doubles as a bell housing bolt. So we'll have to look at that from up top. But for now, we can disconnect all the electrics, loosen these, loosen the top, and then come back under here to loosen these fully to get the starter motor out. Let's get the electricals off first. So let's get this plastic backing off. That just pops off. Then we can get that, looks like a 13. So I can work this nut off the end of the thread, like that. See if this all comes away now. There we go. Okay, there's that wire that's behind it. Okay, so that one's cracked. Let's get this lower one. So let's bring the car down, see if we can get that top bolt, and come back under here then to take these fully out and then get that starter changed. Okay, so from up top, if you just peer through there, you can start to see the top part of that starter. And down there, see if I can get a shot of it. Where are you? Anyway, right down there is the bolt. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see well what I've done. Is I've fed the ratchet through the back down here. And let's see if I can. So I can just get the ratchet to catch. Yeah, but I'm going to need two hands just to hold it on there. Yeah, but I managed to feed the ratchet through the back. It's just on top of the bell housing, right next to the gear selector. So I'm just using my free hand just to support and hold the ratchet on in place. Then you can work it out without having to take anything else off. Once you've cracked it, I ended up switching to a smaller ratchet just so that I can try and get as much movement in there as possible. But now it's gone so slack, it's too loose for the ratchet to work off. So I'm just working it off with my fingers now. Okay, so there you go, there's that top one out. So I'll just place that in the scuttle panel safe, just make sure it won't fall anywhere. Now that that top bolt is out and safe on the scuttle panel, let's put the car back up in the air and get the bottom two bolts and get this changed. Okay, so car's back up in the air. Bloody whistling. You can already see it separating. Okay, that's the bottom one out. using your free hand, you lift up the back end of the starter just to make it a bit easier if you're turning it out by your fingers. And if you can hear that whistling, it's because I turned the radio off so I can record. So Wayne on the other lift is making his own music, it seems. All right. So there's that one out. So with this free, gently guide it out. And there you go. She's out. So with this one out on the floor, it's worth noting that these bolts are different lengths. So it's easy to work out which one is which, because this part of the starter is a lot thicker. So naturally that takes the longer thread, and this one the shorter. The only other one then is the one that's up top anyway. So that's already separate from these two. So it's just important just to make sure you don't put the wrong one in, because obviously the longer one, if that goes in, you're gonna have issues. You'll notice, but you don't want to make that mistake. So here's our new starter compared to our old. You always want to compare them to each other just to make sure that there's no major differences. You want to make sure that the solenoid and the setup on there is the same, because you don't want to have issues, especially with the setup on this with the signal wire. So the signal, you might have seen when I was taking it off, is a large ring connector which goes over the main live and is just pressed up against this ring in the back. So when that sits into the plastic cover that goes on top of this, there's a little spring on the back of it which presses it against this connector. It's not the best. I don't know why they haven't just got a normal ring connector with a threaded nut on it just to hold it tight. But there we go, that's Fiat for you. Before you fit this, you just want to make sure that everything is right with that plastic housing, that you want to put that ring connector back into where it needs to be against that spring, so that when this is in place, everything can just be popped straight on nice and easily. So let's go do that now and get this on. So on the back of this on the back of this plastic housing, which the main live goes through, that's where this ring lives. So you want to make sure that that lives in there like that. I'm not sure if you can see with my thumb in the way. Yeah, so it's a terrible design, because that spring could fail, and if it makes a bad connection, you're still gonna have issues starting. So what we might have to do is actually put that on first and then feed that on, just because everything's so fiddly and it'll probably pop out anyway by the time I put that starter in place. So feeding the new starter up. So again, it's just in the reverse of how you took it out. Be mindful of the wires, so you don't want to jam anything. Once you're lined up, you want to make sure that that dowel sits in the hole. So then the longer nut, or the longer bolt, sorry, goes through that dowel into there, and you just want to start that thread by hand. So you want to take this, not so it's tight, but just so it can't fall out of position, because there is a little bit of wiggle in that starter now. So we're going to want to pivot that to line up the bottom one. Until that catches. Do the same there, run that in by hand. Before we put the top one in, while we're down here, we may as well reconnect everything onto the back. And then all we've got to worry about is putting in the top bolt, tightening that, coming back down here, tightening here. Just double check everything, put the battery back on, and we should be good to go. If we put the ring over so that sits in position. Okay, so if we put on this plastic housing first and line it up with that ring. Okay, so the last few times I've tried to film this, my GoPro has died for whatever reason. So I'll just explain where we are at the minute. The starter motor is loosely in place, held in with these 2 bolts. I've put that O-ring connector onto the signal part of the starter, and I've put this plastic housing that holds the main live feed over that as well. That's got a spring built into it, which compresses that O-ring connector onto the starter terminal. So when you put the spring washer and the main nut onto the live terminal, when you tighten that up, it compresses everything against the solenoid. So that's what holds everything tight. It's a really bad design. I wouldn't do it like that. Right now, everything seems tight here. I'm going to leave this cap off. So what we're going to do now is go upstairs and put in that top bolt. Going to make sure that all the bolts are able to go in nice and easily. And then come back here, final tighten everything, double check how tight that live terminal is, and then put on this cap. So let's go do that. Okay, so here's the fiddly part again, where you're gonna have to use your arm just to bring it round to start off this bolt and try it off by hand until you've got enough purchase on it so you can get a ratchet. So again, you're gonna have to feel for it, so I'm not gonna be able to put this on camera for you, so. And I don't want to see my face struggling the entire time. So once you've got enough slack taken out, you can put a ratchet on. You can give it a quick nip, just to make sure it's fairly tight. So now all of the bolts are in and it's on the dowel. So you know that the starter motor is positioned correctly onto the gearbox. So now we'll go back underneath, tighten up those 2 bolts, double check how tight the live connection is. I can put on that insulated cover, come back up here, just double check this is still tight after I've tightened up the other ones, and then battery back on and we can start it up. We'll give these a final tighten with a full-size ratchet now, but they feel nice and tight. Going up to this electrical connector. Just giving this another quick nip. Yeah, that's nice and tight. So now I'm happy I can put that cover back on. There you go. It should just click into place. There we are. There we are, so they're tight. So now under here, we're all done. So now we can put back the under tray. So we're going to feel one last time how tight the top bolt is after tightening up all the other ones downstairs. Just want to give it that final little nip. So now that's all done down there. Now it's just a case of putting the battery back on. So we can reconnect the battery. Tighten this up. So now, fingers crossed, she'll start. Oh, I think then car's still on the lift, so. Happy days. Let's try it again, just to make sure it wasn't a one-off. There are, no problem, job done. So that is how you go about replacing a starter motor on a Fiat 500X. Hopefully this video has helped, guys, so if it has, please drop us a like. And if you've got any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. So that's it for this video, guys. See you in the next one. Cheers.